Good evening. Welcome to Take Two. So glad that you guys could tune in and join us. We want to encourage you to participate. If you have questions, you can write them in, and remind you too that you can come down here if you want to join in live and be part of the discussion. That's available to you as well. Trying to move into people getting back together. It's kind of new for some of us, but that is happening again. There is the Full Circle Community Discussion this Saturday at 5 o'clock at the Works Building. Jordan's leading that. Do you know anything more about that? What it's?
No, he kind of just said it was like a safe space, safe discussion space. So don't worry about if you think a certain way. Just bring your ideas, and I don't know if there's gonna be a topic.
So if you want to come down, a safe space, unlike the unsafe spaces, this is a safe one. So you
Right.
bring your ideas and be with some other people who want to get together and discuss. And so that's happening. This Sunday, I spoke about the Lord's Prayer, and I thought might as well start off reading what I spoke about, and then I'm going to kind of have you jump in with some thoughts and questions maybe that you had.
Cool.
Okay. So it's taken from Matthew chapter 6, starting at verse 9 through 15. And Jesus says, "Pray then like this: Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we all have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For if you forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses." So, commonly known as the Lord's Prayer or the Our Father. So, what thoughts come to your mind? I mean, questions maybe from the whole thing, or things maybe I didn't touch on that or need clarification?
Yeah, I think there's some of that. A lot of, I mean, I wrote a little bit of all that.
Okay, cool.
So I think first off, I thought it was really cool that you had took the other passage where they had talked about the Lord's Prayer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like one said, say it like this, one said, say this. And is it like, which one is it? You know,
Mm-hmm.
like, and I think that's really cool place to start because it's kind of off the bat challenging people to, get away from like, this is how it has to be.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some concepts in there that are like, since I was younger, I've sat and like literally ripped apart the prayer and said it different ways, and
Mm-hmm.
and learned like you said, like hallowed meaning like unique or holy or like set apart, or these things.
Yeah.
And like to be able to even say it like that when you're reciting the prayer, I think adds like a different dynamic to the prayer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and imagine if you got stuck saying "say it like this," you wouldn't be
Yeah.
able to say it any other way. And I think that's why I thought it was great that you started like that.
Yeah, and just having the option to respect it as it is and say it like it is, but also the option to, like you were saying, dig into it, tear it apart in a healthy way, right? In a way
Yeah,
that's
and
good.
not saying it like it is
Mhm.
isn't disrespecting it. Like I call Alex or Alexandra or Babe or Love.
Mhm.
It's not that I don't like if I don't call her by her name like her mom intended. Or like
Yeah.
if her mom says like no, people should only call her by her name. I think that's where we start getting in trouble, where we start saying this is exactly how it has to be. This is
Mhm.
exactly how it should be said because that's how it's said in the Bible, and
Yeah.
don't say it any other way. And I think then you won't be able to explore the depth and the beauty of what it's.
Yeah, and I always wonder why those things happen, right? Why does it come to a place where people want to just have it a certain way? And I think a lot of times it's good intentions,
Yeah.
right? They're wanting to maintain
Preserve
the
it.
integrity, yeah, of those things, and I think we can. I even mentioned that it's a translation. We're taking all these things from the Greek and making it into our language, so it's
Right.
always going to be a little different than what it was. So it's impossible to say it like it was because we don't speak that language, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to be aware of all those things. That way, it gives us the freedom to lean into it, I think, in a little different way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
good. No,
Oh,
that's
there's so
important.
much good stuff. And then I love that you say like bringing back the kingdom, like bringing back the creator with the created,
Yeah.
the creator with the created space. To me that was like pretty brilliant stuff because when I think about the prayer itself and like thinking about thy kingdom come and thy will. So that's another thing I want to talk about later. But maybe you could talk a little bit more about what brought you into that thinking of. I even like that idea that you made with the two circles and then like the space getting smaller. You know, like
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think for me there's been a whole shift just regarding what the kingdom of heaven is, or the kingdom of God. Because for myself, and I know a lot of people, the idea, or it seemed like the goal of Scripture, was to get us to leave the earth and go to heaven, right? And understanding the kingdom come, your will be done. And again, that's a parallelism, right? They're saying the same thing. It's the reverse. It's no, we're wanting to see the kingdom and earth kind of restored, right? We're wanting to see that take place. And so having that mentality puts us more in an active role, right? Where the other is I can be passive. One day, one day by and by, I'll fly away. I think that's old hymn or something like that. Gosh, I remember singing that somewhere. But that whole idea of I'm going to escape, it's going to be, everything's going to burn. All those thoughts are making us passive. They're stopping us, maybe not stopping us, but they can hinder us from understanding that there is so much potential to unveil the kingdom here.
Yeah.
In our lives. And so having that kind of understanding of this is how it was in the garden, where we had the kingdom of heaven and we had earth, and they were in harmony, the creation. And then the story of the serpent, we have creation itself, just luring, the creation away from the creator. And so we started to see that shift.
Cool.
Right. And when that happens, then the whole point is, okay, how do we restore this? The restoring isn't, well, okay, we're going to just go somewhere. It's no, we got to bring it back to how it was.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why Jesus is the last Adam. Right. And he's the new Israel. And the church is his body. It's all supposed to bring that whole thing back. So.
And maybe that leads us to the next part, which I had a question, because you said, and you kind of ran through this, so you said that kingdom and God's will are like the same.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of even alluded to it right here, that it's like the kingdom of heaven and and the created were together.
Mm-hmm.
So are you saying that the kingdom exists and God's will also exists, and those things were representations of like the will was God's garden? Or because the way I always understood and the way I see it, I saw it as two separate things, like, and then probably the reason why I think he has to say both, because it's like God's kingdom exists and his will is yet to be determined if it exists. Like his will is us, almost, in a sense. Like it's like it's not yet or something,
Well, yeah, and I think the kingdom is here and not yet, right? Just like his will is here but not yet fully understood. So I think they work together, but yeah, there is that tension of the kingdom is, like Jesus says, the kingdom is at hand. At one point, it's within you. So it's something that is present, but then there's something still waiting to come. It's not like it should be, right? We can all see that things aren't like God would want them to be. And so there is the tension of it existing, but we keep leaning into it. And I think that's true with God's will. God's will, that can be a difficult thing to explain. And I think my understanding, especially with what Jesus is saying, God's will looks like Jesus, right? He is the will of God. And how he lives is how the will of God shows up in our sphere on this earth. And so the will of God is still unfolding as well through us, through the people who hear his voice, who hear and understand his character and try to emulate who Christ is. I think the will of God is seen in those things, and it's something that is constantly unveiling, and we are wanting to see more and more take place, right? And that's why when we see things like, poverty and the abusing of people or racism, human trafficking. All these different things are outside of the will of God, right? They are, this kind of hell on earth. They are a detachment from kingdom and God's will, and they are this asserting of creation and the things that people who are detached from the will of God are putting into play, and that's what we're trying to reconcile. How do we stop all these things and get it to be more in line with what we see in Christ and what the will of God is? I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, I mean, not fully, but it's not supposed to. I mean, it's a big question. Just start walking around saying like, is kingdom and the will of God exactly the same? Should be able to.
Yeah,
not
I mean,
answer
I
that.
think though what Jesus is doing is trying to connect the two. But I went into little detail talking about the will of God because I think there's a lot of confusion on what it is, right? Where we think it's so specific, and I said micromanaging. God's not micromanaging his creation, expecting us to all do this exact thing, It's like I would hear the term the perfect will of God. And whatever the perfect will of God was, I blew it when I was 3, right?
Yeah.
I mean, whatever, it's like there was early on I messed up and I've been messing up. So whatever it was, it doesn't even look like anything to me now. And I just think that concept, those kinds of things are harmful because they're paralyzing to us. I know, and you might even know some people, I know some just amazing people who, won't go on a date or won't, take that step to a serious relationship because they don't want to do anything outside of God's will.
And maybe that's what I was trying to say earlier with why I think they're different, because I picture God's kingdom already existing, like he created it, it exists, and we're like calling it to the earth and the kingdom to unite, and then God's will being this thing that we are. This is like this. I don't know. I picture like my will, like if I picture my will to eat a hamburger or something, like if I will to eat something, right, and there could be a lot of things against my will, like maybe I don't have money, or the person doesn't want to sell me the hamburger, or maybe the hamburger is there's no meats, so
Yeah.
there's all these things blocking God's will, and we are some of those, and I think, or we might even be looking at it completely wrong and saying that you at 3 years old messing it up is also still part of God's will, or like that he can still use all of us to accomplish his will, and when we pray something like this, we're praying for realization or conscious recognition of his will, but
Yeah.
I don't see it as like the same thing. I don't know, and I could be wrong, and it could be so,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting just nuance that you put into that, because it makes me aware of how limited our vision is, really. I mean, I see this much of a picture that's this big, and when we start talking about God and God's will, and it's like, okay, in the kingdom exists, but if God exists outside of time, then his will is also probably here and outside of time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like they probably overlap in those ways, but we use these words so that we can connect our thoughts to them,
Right.
but our thoughts are still limited in their understanding of all that it means.
Yeah, that's why we're digging like this, so we can get a little.
Yeah,
bit
but it's definitely fun to think about it. And it's important, though, I think, to understand that God's will is not meant to be restrictive, right? It's like it's meant to help us move in a direction. And if you can move in any direction that is good, any direction that looks like God, then I would say it's in his will, right? And it does, like, should I, help, the people who are homeless, or should I help the people who are orphans in Mexico? Yes. Well, which one should I do? Which one's God's will? Both, right? It's like whichever one is near and dear to your heart, then do that one. Whichever one you have the passion for, because they're both good. They're both in God's will. And it would be terrible if, like some of these people who I know who are so paralyzed by, I want to do God's will, they just say, well, I'm waiting for the Lord to show me. and do nothing, right? It's like, no, do something that's good, because that's God's will. Do something that represents the character of Christ where you're at, with the people around you, with the things that you're passionate about, because that's God's will, and that's going to help unveil his kingdom. That's the ushering in. That's the helping us to, declare the beauty that is God, and reveal it through the things that we do. And so I think that there should be active participation, right? This prayer is a call to participate into the kingdom. I feel like it's not just here's something you say. No, this is our marching orders kind of a thing. This is what we're living into, and it's meant to inspire us into this direction, because God is like this gravity pulling us towards that. And so I look at it as being very active and not passive. And I think the will of God is very active,
I actually wrote that down, that I really like that you said that. That I literally wrote the words, I like when you said the prayer was active, anything but passive and communal. And I think that's a good way to segue into the next one, like not even ever thinking about that it was a communal prayer, like the and our Father, like the whole like us involved in it, and it's always thought it was me and God, and I think that's a really cool point.
Yeah, I still struggle with those things, right? I still read scripture and have that individualistic mentality.
Yeah.
This is for me. And there's a beauty in feeling like that. It's funny when I go and I'm working with people and their dogs, and, their dog is jumping all over them. And, it's like, okay, you got an 80-pound dog, and he's jumping on you, and he's also going to jump on your nephew, and he's also going to jump on grandma, and she's going to break a hip,
Right.
But they like it because it makes it feel like the dog loves me, at least someone's happy to see me when I come home, kind of a thing, right? And it's like, oh, I like the idea of the scripture is belonging to me, it's meaningful to me, and of course it is. But if you see it outside of also the inclusion of others, then it can do damage, right?
Or even like not even the inclusion of others, the way that you see it to be able to serve others, like
Yes.
it is to you about how you should relate and to others.
Yes,
And that
exactly.
you cannot see, if you can't see how it relates to how you should relate, then I think there's a problem. You're reading it in a way that serves yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of the danger.
Yeah,
of Christian
exactly. I mean, that's so important. It's like you need to see this in how you are connected with. I mean, that's why it's a body, right? It's like the hand can't say to the foot, I don't need you. It's that understanding of, you are in this together, right? And seeing it in that way, and having just a different paradigm when I see the kingdom, the will of God, it's us, right? And it needs to be inclusive. It needs to bring more and more people in. It's meant to do that. It's meant to grow. And so having that understanding of the communal aspect of it is so important. I mean, it's just throughout everything that Jesus is writing there. It's just helping us to see us connected to more.
Yeah.
I think that's a big deal.
Yeah. Why did you decide to choose to talk about the Lord's Prayer during the politics of Jesus?
Well, this is still going through the sermon, right? It's still going through the idea of this is all about that. And I think one of the things that happens here in this is how we interact, forgive our debts, as, we forgive others. This idea of trespass, debt, forgiveness is something that is difficult, I think, for us. And it's something that is connected intrinsically in prayer. Every time Jesus talks about these great things of prayer, there's also this. And when you go to the the temple and you have something against your brother, go and reconcile. And if you're going to move this mountain, then you first need to be okay with them and you need to forgive them. There's that kind of connection. And so I think the communal aspect of this and the being able to forgive and work things with others is, I don't know, what we need right now, right? I mean, it's just, there's so much hostility and conflict, and I think this is really dealing with that. And so I don't know if that's political, but it seems like it to me. It seems like it's dealing with the conflict, of what's happening with others.
For sure, and then the self conflict too. Like it's always every time I've read this for myself and read it over and over again, I felt like there was some of this the thing that came countercultural to us was the thing that it was reminded you needed to do. It was like that, like almost off the bat, it's like Our Father, like you're praying to something outside of yourself, something that's larger than yourself.
Yeah.
And you're praying for forgiveness for those who have hurt you and that you hurt, and like, I mean, everything about it, like even praying for God's will and a kingdom, like I think it's like this idea that we are like, we're constantly, this world almost is like constantly like pushing us towards individualism and like how we see ourselves. And you had mentioned that this is kind of battling individualism, even with the contents of which it says our and this and us. And I think that's like, it's something I never really thought of. I always thought of it as being something countercultural to how we initially like think, but I think it's really powerful to think, to dissect it like this and still see it the same exact way, to see that it's like things that we would naturally not want to do. God's like, even the bread, like understanding how you said like it was like the manna and like what, like how to like not waste it. Like I think our natural movement is to waste, is to not
Hoard,
forgive, is to hoard, is to take, like, and it's like that kind of stuff is real cool,
Yeah. And, again, the attitude that we have, the gratitude, the attitude of gratitude.
Attitude of gratitude.
There you go. It's important, right? That's again, part of this, being thankful, being appreciative for the things that you have, and recognizing that, we have a lot, and we should be grateful, and we should also be generous, right? I mean, that's kind of what I'm going to talk about next week, is just the idea of, he talks about a good eye or an evil eye. And an evil eye is a greedy eye. And a greedy eye is always seeing things as scarce. There isn't enough. Where a good eye is generous and there's abundance, right? And so this idea of giving us our daily bread is you're taking care of us, right? And so recognizing that it's happening and we can enjoy the things that we have and make them opportunities for joy and expression, opportunities for celebration. That story, I was just been thinking about, why do I remember 4 saltine crackers as just one of the best meals of my life? Something was happening at that age that was appreciative, that it'd probably be good to get back to. Right. You know what I mean? It's like whenever I think of my daughter when she was young and she would wake up, she'd always wake up singing, right? She'd wake up, I'd hear something and she'd be in her bed and she'd be singing some, Beauty and the Beast song or something. And it's like, that's my goal in life, to wake up singing. She didn't even, I don't know how long she's up, but man, before she hit the floor, she was singing. She just had this expression of joy. And I think having that kind of attitude of, man, look at what I have. This is provided for me. God has given me this, How amazing is that? The miraculous things that we get to enjoy and eat and that provide for our bodies and how it all works. It's incredible. It really is incredible. And how appreciative should we be for those things? Yeah. And wouldn't that be a draw to people to see God better if we were more appreciative, even for those kinds of daily things, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember saying, or genuinely saying the Lord's Prayer and then like putting myself in a better mindset, you know?
Yeah.
It almost like resets you, you know, to like a appreciative place, you know? You're like, all right, like, uh, give us this daily bread. All right, give us what, you know, our portion today, and make sure that I do it without any malice in my heart, and forgive those who have hurt me. And like, I think there's like a, what do you call this? Like almost like we're talking about mere Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
There's like, he's talking about the natural, or if you never read the Mere Christianity book, he's like talking about like natural instincts towards doing something, and some people would argue that what C.S. Lewis was talking about was that these natural instincts are like learned from school, or like that herd mentality or something like this. But what he's saying is that they're not those things, because we naturally have a way that we expect other people to act, and accept that, and that's the evidence of that is that we see how we react when people do bad to us, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like he's like just dissecting that concept. But I think what the Lord's Prayer is doing is focusing us on which one of those natural reactions should I hate using the word should. I don't like shitting on people. It almost feels like the Lord's Prayer is like focusing on the important of the natural like interactions that C.S. Lewis is talking about.
Yeah.
You know, like forgiveness and upward thinking, bringing down God's will, like meeting God's will with God's kingdom. Like these like concepts are like things that I think we all, if whether or not you're Christian or not, have it. Like we have like this, what do you call this? Like innate kind of desire for the beyond or something. That's why we like do sci-fi. It doesn't matter like what you are, like religious, like what your denomination is, but you always think about this thing, this like beyond, and it's like helping you focus back on.
Yeah.
That.
Why do we imagine a better world, right? Why can we imagine that there are ways that we're supposed to treat people, you know, things should stop, and why are those things even there, and where do they come from, right? And that's the whole thing. I mean, even Einstein said, you know, logic can get you from A to B, but your imagination can take you anywhere, right? That kind of thing. And I think it can also be the way that God is revealed, you know, through the imagination. It's like, how did we think about those things? Why can we think about those things? Why do we sense and feel? Why does every society have a similar understanding of, you know, like you were talking about being hurt? That's not a good thing if someone hurts you, right? If a friend betrays you, there's no culture that says, yeah, it's cool. You know, everyone says, no, a friend should not betray you, right? That's not cool. And so those things are, I think, part of, you know, that will, that kingdom, that mentality. I touched on it a little bit, and I don't know if you had any questions on just the idea of evil, right? Where he talks about, you know, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that? Because that's a minefield for me. I mean,
remind me what you had said, because now I can't remember off the top.
The first thing when I hear that, my mind goes to, why do I have to pray, God, deliver me from evil and not lead me into temptation? Right? If I don't pray that, are you going to lead me into temptation? Like, really? You know, I have to pray. Did you pray, don't lead me, because today he might lead me? You know, that mentality kind of comes up. And so I don't think he's saying that. But I think that there is this idea of evil. And I mentioned that John talks about evil in three ways. He talks about our flesh, he talks about the world, and he talks about the devil or Satan. And those all have different expressions, right? And I think this idea of evil has different expressions. That it's not just, you know, oh yeah, there's just the devil and he does all the bad things. Well, then there's sometimes me and I do some, you know, crappy stuff. And then there's this, you know, worldly, individualistic that cares more about money than it does about people. Those kinds of things, right? All these things evil can be encapsulated by all those, right? And so there's just a lot. I mean, one of the things, I think, I don't know if it's another book C.S. Lewis does. He does the problem of pain, but I think he talks about evil in Mere Christianity too. Just like, why would God allow this, right? And so that's just something that trying to figure out how this looks. When I pray, don't lead me into temptation, but deliver me from evil. And so the only thing I could think of is like a guide. Don't get me lost. I'm trusting you.
That's right. That's what you said. I remember,
Yeah. Kawasaki-san, who saved us in China.
Yeah, that's that crazy.
It was nuts, man.
Yeah.
It was literally nuts. I mean, it was terrifying just to be in a country where the only person who speaks their language and your language is this one lady, and I'm in a room with 500 people trying to get out of the airport, and it's like first come first serve, and it was nuts.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was insane.
I mean, no thoughts off the bat, but I like to picture the things like the order things coming.
Mm-hmm.
And he says lead us not to temptation, deliver us from evil. Sometimes I think the temptation does obviously lead us into evil.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that you said, do we even have to pray those things? Like, is one going to keep us from the other?
Mm-hmm.
Because why are both of them in there? And that's the same thing I feel about the kingdom and the will.
Yeah.
I think they're cool to meander. Like, why are they both in there? Are temptation and evil different? Is one like the pre to the other? So off the bat, I think it sounds like temptation. Lead me not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. It's like me saying I don't know, keep me away from the smell of cake, because if I get to the cake, then I'm gonna eat the whole thing, or something like that. That's what it sounds like. Yeah.
I mean, and literally, it is, the word is trials, right? Temptation is trials, and so it's like keep me from the trials, which again brings up questions to my mind. It's because sometimes in John 17, Jesus said, "I pray for them, but I don't pray that you would take them out of the world." Right? It's like, well, that would get us out of the trials if he got us out of the world, but that's not what he meant. He didn't want us out of the world, but maybe the idea is, when I am going to encounter the trials that might lead me to do evil, help me in that decision making, to move me in the better direction, lead me in this direction instead of eating the cake,
Right.
Take me to the kale.
Take me to the K. Change the K to an L. I think there's something that you said that kind of resonated with me, like trials, and then what I immediately thought of was really like reading in Job, right? And his trials eventually led him to blow up on God. The trials are what led him to the evil.
Yeah.
I think when they say he's upright and check my. Have you tried Job? Because he's the last upright one left. The trials have actually brought him to to battling God, and I think anytime you battle, when you battle God, that could be looked at as evil, So I think maybe the trials are the thing that leads you to the evil, and so he's like, let's start there, keep me away from the trials, and then also away from the evil. Maybe they're paired. I mean, it sounds like they're paired. So
Yeah, I mean, gosh.
who knows?
Yeah, because trials you can't escape. In the world, you're going to have trouble, right? Jesus said. And so we're going to have difficulties, but there's always the opportunity to make a better choice. And I think that's kind of where we need to see that God is leading us to make better choices. He's giving us, understanding by the character of Christ, the will of God, the kingdom of God, what it looks like. I think those are for us examples of how to make better choices,
You got a definition for evil?
Not really. I mean, not off the top of my head. I mean, I would say evil, and this idea is anything that is contrasting the will of God. I think that would be my, just off the top of my head, idea. In this context, here is the will of God, here's the kingdom of God. Evil is away from that. So anything that moves us away from what looks like the kingdom, bless you, then I think that would be considered evil.
And I think if our definition of like God's will would be that we kind of move towards loving and serving each other and loving Him, then maybe if that is the definition of the evil, then it'd be like the trials are what lead us to like thinking individually, and that individual thinking is what keeps us from God. Like so it's like it's connected in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely could be. I mean, it could be that whole moving us into that self-consumption kind of a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, I think that these things do combat that self-preservation mentality that we have. And it's not bad to want to be healthy and strong and safe. All those things are good and part of preservation. But the self-preservation that is you over others, right? It's like, okay, there's a crisis, hoard food. And it's like, it happened with Y2K too. It's like, okay, everyone get guns and go get this. I go, really? Like, am I gonna shoot someone who needs food, who comes to my house? It's like, because I've got to bunker down. Am I gonna not give someone toilet paper, my neighbor, because they need it? Because you know what I mean? It's like that.
I had that talk with somebody because I'm like, because we had like the gun talk, like First Amendments, or like what's the Third Amendment? What is the gun amendment? The Third Amendment? Who knows? Yeah. I don't know. But we had to talk about this, and they were like, we have trying to take our guns, and I'm like, but then what? Are you ready to? Are you what? Like in my head, I'm like, if I feel like you're okay talking about shooting people, like, should I be worried? Like that we're like, okay, like,
yeah.
Because that's what essentially we're trying to protect. I guess I don't know. I'm not gonna. Let's change the subject.
We're gonna get some emails now.
Yeah, that's not exactly what I wanted to talk about, but I think we could go there one day.
Well, yeah, no, I think there is that idea. I mean, that's kind of what I was leaning to. It's like, really, as people who are trying to unveil the kingdom, right, to make the name of God beautiful, how does that show up, right? And I'm not trying to take away anyone's guns, but I want people to have the mentality of what looks like the kingdom above the mentality of what's going to be best for me, right? I need to have, all this toilet paper, and I need to make sure that I have my food and I have this storage. I mean, again, this is kind of leading into next week where he's talking about money. And, there was a time where everyone had and shared what they had in common, right? It was like, oh, you need something? I'll give it to you. It was just, that's how the church grew. That's what was so appealing, is people were caring for each other, right? Where there was a need and someone met it. And it's like, they didn't, say, well, I'm retiring in 2 years, and so I really can't help you right now, because then what's going to happen to me? Or I'm going to buy a new car, and, if I give you this money, I can't get that. You know what I'm saying? It's like this, I'm wanting this life for myself, and I stop being generous, and I stop being kingdom-minded, and I stop being others-minded, and pretty soon I am just hoarding, and I'm this vacuum where I need to feel secure, I need to feel safe, when everything else is a threat to me. And I think those are the kinds of things, I think that is evil, right? I think that's an evil mentality, because then we live in a world of scarcity, right? We live in a world where God doesn't care, and I have to care for myself. Where if I actually give and am generous, I'm showing that God actually cares and supplies. Right? And I think generosity is a spirit. It happens doesn't matter how much money you have, right? I know people who are very wealthy who are very generous. And I know people who don't have much and been very generous.
What made me think of when you're like, somebody got mad at you for saying if you can surprise God.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's one way. You could have a lot of money and not give it away when someone needs it. And then he's like,
What the?
he's like, I
What?
gave you said it, you would give it. Like I
Yeah.
think that's a good way that God would be like, that's surprising me because you said or you told me if you had the funds, if you were
Yeah.
affluent, you were gonna help people when you win the lotto or whatever, And you're like, I think that's the surprises. I
Yeah.
think.
Weren't you just singing "All I Have Is Yours"? Right? Didn't I hear those words coming out of your mouth? You were like this. Remember?
Yeah.
Here's a snapshot. Yeah, I think so. I think those things, strike at the heart of God and also please Him, right? And that's a beautiful thing too, to think that we can, please the Lord just like we can grieve Him.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we could grieve someone if we couldn't surprise them to some degree.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know how God thinks. This is all just, in our heads here, but
Yeah.
these things,
We could meander.
yeah. And I think it helps us to get a little bit more insight of our relationship with Him, and what it might look like. I remember when it was my son Samuel, when he was, probably like 5 years old, and it was Christmas, and he got this toy. It was a Peter Pan toy. It was when Robin Williams, that Peter Pan came out, or Hook, right? Hook came out. And so he had this toy, and it was pretty complicated. And I was looking at it, and first we were going, oh yeah, we'll put it together, but it was late at night. It's like, oh dude, we're not doing this tonight. We'll tackle this tomorrow because this is going to take a while. And I went to bed. In the morning, I got up, and my son was there. He didn't go to sleep, right? He's got these like circles under his eyes, and he holds up the toy, and he did it all himself. And I was just like, you did that? And he goes, yeah, I put it together. And he saw my surprise, and it meant a lot to him.
Yeah.
For a long time, he'd say, remember when I made that toy? I was like, yeah, that was amazing. You made that toy. And I think of doing those kinds of things with God, right? Where I can look what I did, God.
If we could surprise ourselves, I think we could surprise God.
And maybe the surprise is, again, it's our language to try and communicate it. But I think it's a beautiful thought to try and do that. It's like, man, I'm going to blow his mind.
Yeah.
I'm going to do this, and I can't even believe I'm doing this, right? And we hear stories of people who are so generous, so selfless in how they live, and it moves us to tears, and it strikes us, and it challenges us, and it motivates us.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine it not doing something like that to God, right? It's like that was just beautiful. That just put, a lump in my throat and tears in my eyes, and I can't imagine God not feeling like, yeah.
I think that's a much healthier way to think about God and His emotions than He expects perfection, and if we don't hit it, He's constantly like punishing us.
Yeah.
I think that's the old way I grew up thinking, like that we are constantly failing.
Yeah.
And like if we just so happen to fall upon like this grace or perfection today,
Yeah.
then we just so happen to line up with God's will. But this seems a lot more human and like the way He created us to be and understands and knows,
Yeah, and I mean, I think that old way too, that's where you get that trouble with lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil, because that's like, well, maybe I'll smite you, right? It's like there was a Far Side cartoon, where it has a picture of this guy, and like this piano's going to fall on him, and there's a button up in heaven that says smite, and God's getting ready to press it, right? It's like, that's how the thought is, okay, God's going to smite you because you did something bad, right? Mentality. Or that God's just, He's got everything figured out, and it's like this mathematician, and everything's already planned, and you can't figure. There is no free will, really, because it's already planned and orchestrated by God. He knows everything, all powerful. And I think those kinds of things, too, takes away the passion. It takes away the emotion that I think we need, to understand God. I think to try and understand God without emotion, it's like, why did He give me emotion? Aren't we created in His image? Doesn't my idea and feeling of love, for my wife or my kids, isn't that an expression that God has given? And maybe, even like Jesus says, if you then will do this for your kids, right? How much more will I do it? There's that comparison. So I think all these things are meant to draw us in to the emotion of it.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty heavy. I mean, seeing this as an invitation to participate in a revolution, it seems a lot more, it has more substance to it and seeing it that way than just something I recite or just something I dissect. Seeing this, Jesus saying, this is how I want you to pray. It's an active prayer. You're participating in the unveiling of the beauty of God here on earth, just like it is in heaven. And this is how you do it. You're grateful for the things that you have. You're sensitive. You're asking for guidance. Lead us not into temptation, deliver us from evil. You're forgiving. And I mentioned too that word debts. There's a word that means just debt, like monetary, and there's a word that means just sin, like things that are wrong. But this word means both. And so it's one of those things where, well, maybe we are to really be forgiving. What would happen if we really forgave debts, with people? And like they used to have the year of Jubilee every 7 years, everyone got back what was theirs originally, kind of like clean slate, let's start again, and it would start all over. It's like, what would happen if things happened like that, if there was that kind of generosity, that kind of forgiveness?
That's what Jubilee means.
Yeah. But there is still people who take advantage, right? And so,
Yeah.
they go back to the mine.
It's a shame. But I've seen people. And I say people. I seen me. I seen people change. Like you've seen like actual transformation. And I think that's where that God exists. And that, yeah.
And to understand that change can happen, right? I know Tori's living with us again right now, and
there's a question up there for you too.
yeah, I saw that question. Yeah. We'll tackle that one in the end. The game might be over. I don't want to know.
All right.
But every now and then, like, Tori will be stuck on, someone who's done her wrong, and I'll remind her, remember when you first came to live with us and you had that Captain America shield, and you wore those funny clothes and you listened to this music, and she'll start laughing because, it was like all of us, we look back at what we did, when we were younger. It's like, oh man, how silly I was, how foolish that was. And it's like, see, you changed, right? And so maybe don't hold on so tightly to this person, what they've done, and think that they can't change as well, right? Because you changed. You don't walk around with the Captain America shield anymore. That's gone. You're a different person now, and that happened to you years ago. Maybe they're a different person too. Having the understanding of maybe you can show that forgiveness too, because you've needed to, forgive yourself from the bad music you used to listen to, or the bad hair you used to have, whatever it was, right? The mullet, those kinds of things. But
like I threw it in there.
I had to think of something bad. The mullet came to mind. Any final thoughts or any questions out there?
From the audience? Anybody? Anyone?
Jasper. And Dodgers, I don't know if they will win tonight. They were down quite a bit when I started here, so I don't know, Gil. I'll find out.
It's that kind of game where it could happen.
It happened last night.
It happened last night, so we'll see.
Yeah.
Are you looking it up? Don't look it up. Don't look it up.
I'm gonna look it up as soon as it's done here. Any final thoughts?
No, just thank you for the intentionality of this one.
You're welcome. Yeah, next one's gonna be on money, so that should be fun.
Yes.
That should be good. It's actually, I'm really excited about it. I think there's some powerful things, even where Jesus, talks about deliver us from evil, this idea of evil, whatever it is. There is something that happens to us that connects us to things that can be good or can be evil, right? How we interact with things. our hold of things and how much things have hold of us. It's an interesting thing that I think we get into.
Actually, yeah, that
next week.
sounds actually like what it's saying. Because when you're asking to be delivered from sickness, you're in it sickness, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, to be asking to be delivered from evil, like, it's like saying that we are in evil, you know? Like, we're in it.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, so it could be that too, you know?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I don't know if we could do this all day, but I mean, the more we talk
No,
about it, the more
that's got my mind spinning now. 'Cause, yeah, that's good.
It's a good one.
That's good.
It's good.
That's good.
Good.
We'll talk about this some more. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you guys for tuning in online. And go Dodgers. I hope they won. But, last year we were down 3-1 to Atlanta, and we came back, won it all. Just saying. Just saying. So, anyway.
Nikki just has to DJ all the games because he's undefeated every time he DJs.
Every time. All right, Nikki boy. Get out there. Let us know. We'll go support.
Yes.
All right, you guys, again, thank you. Hope you enjoy and hope you continue to allow this prayer to be an active part of how you live your life towards God.
Yes.
God bless you guys.
Thank you.